Hello, everyone. My name is Kayla Myers, and I'm a programmer with SF DocFest. So thank you so much to Aaron and John for being here today to talk about One Pint at a Time, a film that hopefully everyone watching this has just watched. And so really appreciative of this film and really glad that we get to have it in the festival and to talk with you all about it today. So thank you so much and welcome.
Having us. We appreciate the festival inviting the film, and I'm glad to have this conversation with you, one of my favorite dudes in the industry, John. So thank you, John, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you all for hosting us for this film festival. I had a great time making the film. Aaron and his wife Bridget are amazing filmographers, and I'm just happy to be in the space. So thank y'all.
Yeah, something that I wanted us to start off the conversation with is, I know, Aaron, there was a short film version of this, and the film is sort of an expansion of your short that I think focused more so on the festival and kind of how that kind of came to be, and then really kind of fleshes out everything. And so I was curious first from you, sort of how you decided to sort of expand it out, and also how you approached like the research, because the film itself spans so many different cities and breweries and places. So I would love to hear about that process. And then John, if you could speak to like how Aaron sort of like approached you and how you decided that you felt comfortable with him sort of following your journey with Cajun Fire. So yeah, I'd love if we could start there.
So actually, I was in 2017 officially started doing heavy research for the documentary, which was always meant to be feature length. And what had happened that a year later, as I was researching the project, an article about festival, Fresh Fest was what it was called at the time. It's now called Barrel and Flow, and then Blacktoberfest. At the time, this came into my Facebook feed, and it was the first Black beer festival in history. And I knew that, of course, computers are listening, but the universe was listening too, because this is something that had never been done before, and I was just intrigued by this event that was coming up. This was going to be part of the research, so I put together a crew real quick, and we contacted told them what I was up to with the documentary, why I wanted to make it, and said, hey, I want to do a development trip to Pittsburgh, and they welcomed us, and that's what happened, and that's how I kind of met John there in Pittsburgh. Cajun Fire was part of that event. Like Elisa Bones Mercado, who's with the Rhythm Brewing Company in Connecticut. At the great place to kind of network with a lot of members of the Black brewing community, which, but 4 years ago was a lot smaller. And what I realized as we were filming and just kind of interviewing people ad hoc, that this was a very important day for that community. So I felt like it needed to be like which is why we decided to make that short, which we called A Fresh Perspective. We figured that we could get that short out to festival while we were making the longer piece, expanding upon the feature-length documentary. And it was kind of a market one pint at a time to let folks know, hey, it's just one story in the Black brewing community to light. We're working on adding all these other stories around a fresh perspective to make it into a feature length. Marketing strategy, and the film did incredibly well. And it allowed us to have similar success with One Pint at a Time, because quite a few of these festivals that selected screening the feature as well. So that's kind of how that whole process happened. And it wasn't that we started with making of the feature. We realized that we should have a short because it needed to stand. Should have a short because it needed to stand.
Yeah, and to further Aaron's point, like he met me at a very interesting time in my business career with the industry. You know, I admittedly had my reservations. I was going through all kind of different legal battles and stuff like that. You know, cease and desist, flying left and right. Thankfully, we was absorbing that and still running with stride. But I did have my reservations. But when I got to further know Aaron, look at his body of work. Just do my own due diligence, and then just build a friendship out of everything. It was pretty smooth. Like his style of filming, like I mentioned, was very non-intrusive. He has a way of shooting that doesn't create tensions. He just kind of let things be captured and then let them be kind of I guess the optic do the work. So, when he came down to New Orleans with his team, New Orleans is a very picturesque place. It's also very random. He was able to, capture it in all its beauty, capture the heart of being in this industry and having to deal with these disparities, but also the milestones. So I was just very happy with the production that he's done and that he continues to done, and also like the team that he works with. Like they're very down to earth, and they have a level of advocacy that they add to the craft beer space that's really not there, So I'm really excited about the momentum of the film, the future opportunities that it's going to present, and also the doors it's going to open for this kind of narrative and language for a billion plus industry. So I'm happy with everything.
Yeah, John, I'm glad you brought up the cinematography, because I think that's something that is really like present throughout the film, like how there's a clear sort of like intimacy and time that I feel like I can really feel that you spent with everyone throughout the film. And I think that actually segues really well into the next question I was going to ask, sort of about a lot of the film is about space and making space and the regulation of space and sort of all of these hoops that brewers, especially Black brewers and brewers of color, sort of have to hop through to be able to actually assert their own space. And so I'm really curious to hear from you, John, sort of about that experience, like having to, all the process of like letters of intent and all the things that you all have to do, but also the added elements of like going to competitions and going to festivals and really putting your name out there. I think it's an element of it that I was aware of, but hadn't really thought about as much until I saw just how much all of you all throughout the film were talking about like these places you needed to go to or things that you had to do. So I'd love to hear you talk about that, John. And then Aaron, if you want to talk sort of about how you weaved that throughout the film as you were sort of editing and piecing together their experiences, because of course you're filming with them at different times, but all of them are sort of saying these really similar things because of course their experiences are very similar. So love to hear you both sort of talk about that.
Yeah, so like my whole thing, like with navigating some of those obvious hurdles to entry, and all the building blocks to get my company where it's at now. It's centered on my mission statement. My mission statement is brewing for socioeconomic change, one pint at a time. That don't really leave too much room to get caught up in like a lot of the obstacles or just get overly consumed by what my competitors are doing. I'm from New Orleans. I think that does breed. It's a birthplace of jazz. That influence, growing up, absorbing No Limit and Cash Money Records and being an avid fan of Prince, his number one thing was always ownership. So when I created my company, from the land to the trademarks, word marks, I'm always investing into the ownership and the long-term play of everything. So because of that, you won't see us in a position where we gotta like have caricatures on our label design or doing things that are out of character for somebody in this space as me. So I recognize, the historical firsts that our company has. I believe in, Black excellence and caring with poise, how we compete. So, I look at it from, I'm an entrepreneur, I look at it from a true competitive angle, the passion and everything, that's just a byproduct, but ultimately, I understand, from a metric standpoint, from a retail standpoint, supply chain, whatever, the company has to have a certain kind of driver. And normally, passion doesn't necessarily fit as the one size end all solution. So I just try to use my business acumen and grow like that and take on my challenges, 1 week at a time.
Yeah, you mentioned about that is something that, was just one of those things that I learned throughout, the 5 years of making this film, from research to, editing and marketing. A lot of brewers that work in craft beer in this country, they don't their own brick and mortars. They're basically out there hustling their beer brand and growing their beer brand, and they don't have, money, generational wealth, family for $500,000 to go, set up shop somewhere, and they don't get access to loans. We don't have to get into that conversation as easily as, their white counterparts. It became clear to me that needed to be present in the film. Deals with it on a daily basis. Houston dealt with it throughout the film, and they're still, again, hustling to keep the brewery alive today. They have very much to work themselves. And Elisa is just focused on growing her brands, the importance of possibly having her own space in the near future. So that was revealed to me as one of the main struggles for it's something that's mirrored in a lot of the minority, not just Black brewers as well, is lack of space to have a lack of funding or lack of access to funding. Those are like the two common denominators for the minority communities. So yeah, that was just something that I felt needed to be like up front and center in the film, so that folks that are out there realize that this is something that's happening. They don't think about it. They're a brewery, drink their beer and leave, but there's this whole other community that's dare I say, like hidden in plain sight. I felt needed to have their time in the spotlight, especially given the history from the African continent that we also discuss in the film, and how that is not really related in today's brewing culture. So I just kind of wanted to talk about all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. As I was saying to John before we started the Q&A, the Black brewer here in Memphis doesn't have their own brick and mortar. You just have to buy their beers from wherever they're being sold, or wherever they're kind of at pop-up events or festivals or things like that. So I'm really glad that it's an element that is really, really highlighted throughout the film. And another question that I had was also sort of, there's also the history that you just mentioned present throughout the film, and especially from a like process standpoint. A lot of like Elisa makes lagers, and everyone is talking more specifically about that. So I'd really love to hear more about, like, as you were filming in specific regions, like filming in New Orleans, filming in New Haven, what kind of like processes, or how the regions sort of different in terms of beer making. I would love to hear sort of more about that as you were filming throughout the years. Like, were there differences that you noticed in people's processes, but also, again, like what are some of the sort of similarities from all of these people coming to the same sort of events all the time? Or just sort of how you, because the film ends like right with the pandemic and sort of like mid 2021. So also if there's just sort of a difference or a shift in beer culture that you may have noticed in your time over the span of 5 or 6 years with the different brewers, if there's anything that you sort of wanted to speak to that, or either of you.
Well, I'll start with this, that we did, John mentioned earlier, our filming style is whatever it is, and that's how it will be presented. It's like the truth subject's point of view. And the reality is that, John focuses on bringing culture and ingredients into his beers, and some of that history. And that's how he picks his ingredients. And Elisa was straight up rhythm. Rhythm has to do with history as a professional dancer. To make a lager because she lives in New Orleans and everyone's making hazies and everyone's making hazies and haze. And in case you don't know what a hazy IPA, it's that beer that looks like orange juice for the most part. And it's a fad across the country and even internationally. So she wanted to bring it back to like what she remembers drinking when her grandmas were drinking beer, which is a lager. So that's thing that she focuses on. And Houston, because of Bastet and his homage to culture, he plays with all sorts of ingredients. So he does hazies. He does big bold West Coast IPAs. He does lagers, pilsners. He does tepache, which is a beer, like a fermented a beverage from, I believe, Mexico. He does something from Finland that's very popular there. So he loves to play with ingredients all the time. That's kind of, those are kind of the process wise. I just know that both Elisa and John, they brew at a different facility. So that's a different beast, rules in place at these that they kind of have to adhere to and find a happy medium to make sure for the ingredient, make sure have come to hands when they're canned and ready to go. With Houston, it was a matter of going from his home, his garage, to like the professional bigger systems in his working with the bigger systems. That wasn't a difficult transition. In terms of the shifts that I saw, there are a lot of great things that I saw, and obviously the big shift is the numbers have grown for Black brewers and minority brewers, and minority brewers, female-owned brewers, LGBTQ, what have you. There are a lot more out there, and you see a lot more people of color and women brewing and owning breweries and kind of front and center when you're in tap rooms. And there's a lot more diversity in tap rooms that I saw 5 years ago when I started researching the film. 8 years ago, my wife and I started drinking craft beer more avidly, and we were really the only people of color among the only people of color. Great, beautiful shifts that I've seen. However, it's to grow by the thousands of breweries each year, and most of those breweries, 99% of them, are white owned. So it's, you can look at the pint as half full. It depends on where you stand on that. But things have to, from my point of view as a consumer, shifted further. And I'll let John add, whatever he has to add to that. I'm sure.
My mouth is watering now since you described all them beers. But yeah, the same. We not even in the same state, but our experiences are the same. Even in Louisiana, damn near drinking capital. You got open container laws. Everybody is it's very diverse, but still in the spaces of beer, that's when that diversity is non-existent, right? So, and that's telling. I mean, we get tourists from just about everywhere in the world mingling and having a good old time. But in them safe spaces, I would say that's craft breweries. it's safe only to one demographic. So, I don't frequent breweries, even my peers, as much as I would like. I'm just as passionate about beer, if not mad scientist passionate about it to a certain extent. But, that passion stops when I come into a brewery, especially when I'm in another state. If I'm traveling alone, you experience it, Aaron. I got my beer and I got out. I ain't trying to be lingering. I don't know the lay of the land. There's still like a lot of sundown towns, if we're being honest. And, breweries tend to have an element in it, particularly from my experiences, that's not really welcoming. So, I always try to preach in the spirit of hospitality, regardless of what you're doing. If you're up on your tab on professionalism, you're supposed to treat all your guests and patrons with some form of hospitality. So, we'll see where it be at in the next 10 years, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think the last question I wanted to ask before we end this is, the film ends with this Black is Beautiful collaboration, and I found that really, really interesting, sort of seeing how that connects to the sort of ideas around community and the communal aspect of drinking beer, of how, as much as food is a communal experience, beer can be very much the same way. And so I would love to hear more sort of about like how you all think about the actual like communion of beer and how that has shaped whether your filmmaking when you were doing this, making the film in post-production, Aaron, or John, as you were continuing to develop with your work, and how that sort of connects to what you all see yourselves continuing to do sort of like in the future.
I'll let you go first, John. I need to ruminate on this for a little bit.
So for me, it's opened up like a lot of opportunities. Like, my background is political science. My other major master's is in community development finance. But for me, beer is an inelastic commodity. Like, it's something that people are always gonna have in a society. Aside from these other fads, I'm strictly devoted to beer, not only from a business standpoint, but for the fact that it's like 5,000 plus, and that's just skating at the historical significance of it. It's been around our society for forever. So, they got a lot of other beverages in this space. You got seltzers, that's only maybe 50 plus years. Then you got other like variations of that. Even ciders, which is a very old industry that used to dominate the American landscape prior to Prohibition, those still like in age pale in comparison to the significance of it. So I do think it's a cultural significance to beer. That's also often kind of like lost and displaced in all the marketing that we get. That hasn't been that crazy as it was in like the 90s and 80s, but it's still like some lingering things, like we experienced with like Bud Light Platinum. You know what I'm saying? That still kind of has that culture that doesn't take it serious. I take the craft really serious. I take the production of it really serious. I value the spiritual realm of beer making. I'm in New Orleans, and a lot of people still practice voodoo as a religion. So I respect all those different aspects of it, and it just allows me, whenever we put out something, we ain't putting out nothing that's gonna miss. We put out things with intention. We put out products that have like some kind of significance to our culture, but also, of course, taste good. So that's kind of where I'm at with beer and the craft. I think a lot more companies that savvy are adapting that principle and really focusing on what they put in the quantity versus just the quality. The quality versus the quantity. So that's how I take it. I take it as seriously as a surgeon takes his craft.
Well, to me, a consumer of the product, not a maker. I don't have the patience. It takes a lot of patience and artistry and a lot of strength and more patience to make a good beer. As a consumer, I have to say I'm very thankful. For the doors that craft beer has opened up for me in terms of creativity, because I was at I was looking for a new story, but I want to be something personal to me, and I wasn't quite sure where to go. But I thought about it. The more I realized I need that can help make a difference within this space that I was in a lot, which is crap. My wife and I were visiting brewery after brewery, everywhere that we in the country. So it became like an adventure, and you know, that experience kind of spawned the idea for the film, especially after I explored more and more about the statistics behind the craft beer industry. Percent of breweries are Black owned, um, and that just kind of shocked me, and I, you know, do something about it, which we did, and I'm very grateful for that. And we did 3 projects. So we did a fresh perspective, which we discussed earlier. We did what called the Brew Church, which was about the first Lutheran-owned brewery in the country, which was us. And then we finished now One Pint at a time. And we're going to expand, hopefully soon, this whole project as a two that we're developing. So I want to continue to work in this space because it's a space that I enjoy as a consumer, and I feel like you know, we're really starting to help make a difference in the industry, and with the folks that we've been able to show it to, and folks that we've been able to, you know, they can use the film as kind of mirror to kind of look at their own business philosophy, you know, acumen, you know, to evaluate if their space is welcoming, you know, to everybody, you know, and then if you're a consumer, that hopefully the film will make you be more intentional with how you spend your money and how you look at breweries. And you're comfortable conversations with breweries if you realize that the space isn't as well as it should be, or as diverse as it should. So yeah, I'm very grateful to be here and for really kind of up to these, you know, new creative outlets. And also I've developed him and other brewers in the film, and other folks in the industry. And we you know, we shared this common thing, which is a great beverage, and it's like the great equalizer, right? I don't see myself being able to do this over moonshine or whiskey or rum, but somehow beer just has this history of being able to kind of bring all these people together from different walks of life, you know, and I think that's a beautiful thing.
Wow. Yeah. Hearing both of those answers just really, really warms my heart. It's really beautiful. And I'm excited to see where things continue for you, Aaron, in terms of like your filmmaking and creative process. So just to end things, I would love if there's anything else that you want to make sure people who are watching or have watched the film, anything else that you want to say to them, or anything that Aaron, you already kind of talked about what you're doing next, but anything else you want to maybe mention about what's coming up next for you, either of you?
I'll go first. There are things real quick. So on our website, onepintfilm.com, we have two called Reshape, and the other one is called Black. So on Reshape, we have a number of organizations that are doing work of diversifying the beer industry. So if you feel galvanized to help make a difference, onepintfilm.com, and go to the Reshape page and donate to one of the statements and see which ones you. They're all kind of doing their part the best that they can. And this is basically an all hands on deck organization that's going to change the industry by itself. So however you feel inspired to make a difference, if you want to make a donation, great. I'm sure they'd appreciate it. And there's another way you can help is there's on the Black breweries page is a growing list. So it's a working list of Black-owned breweries across the U.S. from coast to coast, bottom left to right. So and it's a list that we will continue to grow. We developed Ale Sharpton, who's a journalist and influencer out of Atlanta, and we will continue to gradually Hispanic and Latin-owned breweries and Asian breweries and but that's like second and third phase. Right now we're just focused on Black-owned, but is that folks can help on at One Pint Film on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, and you'll know where we're screening next. And yeah, that's really it. Like I said earlier, we're developing a couple of docu-series. So hopefully those will take off within the next, share more stories in the professional beverage industry that give minorities the light that they deserve. So
Yeah, and on my end, just that is far less significant than what Jose has presented. Just at drinkcajunfire.com, a like, a subscribe, and a follow that goes a long way. You'd be surprised. So just staying abreast on what we're doing. Our products don't disappoint, and we also have a great philanthropic component to a lot of our products that we make. So if you happen to be in the area or in some of the states that we carried in, just give us your feedback. That's all.
Well, thank you both so much for your time and for your work and for sharing with our audiences. I so appreciate it and excited to see how things continue for both of you. So yeah, thank you so much again.
Kayla, thank you. Thank you for having us. It was wonderful. I appreciate you. Cheers.
Oh, Aaron, you were muted just now.
Sarah, take care. Take two.